In this screencast, we are going to look at how humans use and often overuse water for agriculture, industry, and household use. So each of these categories uses tremendous amounts of water. We're going to look at, and you're responsible to know, which ones use the most water and what can we do to help preserve water for each of these categories. Agriculture is the world's largest user of water. It's true in the United States and it's true globally. And one of the reasons is that the plants need water as a limiting nutrient for their growth. And different techniques can be used to water the crop plants, and they each vary in the amount of efficiency that can be found from each system. So here we have the four major ways in which plants for agriculture are watered. Furrow irrigation, flood irrigation, spray irrigation, and drip irrigation. In furrow irrigation, they dig these ditches alongside the plants, and then they can just run one pipe which empties water into these ditches or these furrows and is allowed to flow past them. That method of irrigation is inexpensive to construct and easy to manage, but as you can picture, their plants closer to the water pipe are going to get too much water possibly. Some in the middle may get just the right amount of water, and some plants that are further down the furrow may not get enough water or get less water. And the other problem with this type of irrigation is that it's not very efficient. Only about 65% of all of the water that comes from this pipe is actually taken up by plant roots. So that means another 35% of the water is basically wasted. And I guess that would be fine, except that, as you know, we have very limited amounts of fresh water, and so wasting it would not be a good idea. A second type of irrigation is flood irrigation, shown on the top right. And in flood irrigation, it's exactly what it sounds like. The fields are just covered with water, and then the plants the roots of the plants take up the water. And flood irrigation is slightly more efficient than furrow irrigation, but not by a whole lot, depending on the system and the types of plants. Flood irrigation tends to be 70 to 80% efficient. So roughly 70 or 80% of the water that is put on the field is taken up by plants, but still there's another 25% that is wasted. Another form of irrigation is spray irrigation, and that's when you have a system much like a home sprinkler system where you have a spigot that sprays out the water, and that is much more efficient than the first two, so it's 75 to 95% efficient. The spray goes around in a circle, and some of the circles can overlap so that all of the plants get roughly the right amount of water. But still there is a little bit of waste. And the most efficient form of irrigation is drip irrigation. And in drip irrigation, you have a hose, and it has little perforations, little holes in it the holes are put directly where the plant is. So there might be a hole right here next to this plant, and then nothing here, and then another hole right here by this plant, etc. And that's very efficient. That's more than 95% efficient, which means that more than 95% of the water that runs through that hose goes directly to, or is taken up directly by the plant root. Now, unfortunately, everything can't be drip irrigation. Drip irrigation works very well if you have a plant that you don't harvest the whole plant. So say an apple tree or any type of orchard where you're going to take the fruit off of the tree, but the tree stays in one place. If you have other types of crops like corn, where the whole plant is taken up out of the soil, not just the corn stalk itself, or not just the corn itself, then you can't do this type of irrigation because it would get ripped out of the ground each time, which would not be very efficient. So when this can be used, most farmers in the United States at least do this type of drip irrigation, but probably the predominant form of irrigation for most of our crops is spray irrigation. Industry is also a large user of water. It's second only to agriculture. And it's used for a variety of reasons, but mainly for cooling power plants. So the example here is a nuclear power plant, but other types of plants have these systems as well. In the case of the nuclear power plant, the water is brought in. It's used to, the nuclear rods, the nuclear material, then heats the water without being into contact with it, but it heats the water, and the steam that's created turns the turbine, as we talked about previously. But then the water is very, very warm, and rather than releasing it directly back into the body of water, a great deal of it is released as steam. And some places, such as Brayton Point, have double coolings. Like they use the water twice. They cool it down a little bit and then are able to reuse it, which really helps to conserve water. But this still does release quite a bit of water, or use quite a bit of water. Okay, so next we will look at household use. So take a moment to think, okay, household use is the third largest user of water. So if you will, take a minute to think about which activities in a home might people do that uses the most water. Think about things like drinking water, cooking water, toilet flushing, laundry, showering. Okay, let's first look at the graph on the right, and that is households' use of water broken into percentage of indoor water use. And you can see that probably surprisingly, the largest use of water in a home is with toilet flushing. Second to bathing, then third is laundry, and cooking and drinking water is really a very small portion. And the thing is that the water that is used in most homes to flush toilets is clean, fresh water, stuff that you could drink out of, okay? Some homes actually, I had a student once who had a parent who was a plumber, and he was able to fix up their plumbing so that what's called gray water, or water that's been used for bathing or for laundry, was then piped into the water flushing in his toilets. So that saved quite a bit of water, and his numbers are probably very low. The other way to conserve water with toilet flushing and with all of these things are water efficient appliances. So you can have toilets that have used very, very little water. Modern toilets use far less water to flush than old toilets. And you can have efficient shower heads, which we looked at in lab, and that can lower your amount of water use for bathing. And for laundry, they have these very cool washing machines now that use far less water and far less soap, far less electricity. They're high efficiency. And I loved it when I switched over to mine. It was fantastic to see the clothes are really wrung out, spun out at a very high speed, and they come out of the washing machine almost dry, ready to be hung up, and would be dry overnight on a line, or if using a dryer, you can put it on a lower setting or a shorter setting, and everything dries quickly. So that is another efficiency that can be found. With cooking and drinking, it would be hard to find efficiencies except not letting the water run, say, while you're peeling potatoes, but that's the smallest use. Okay, now let's take a minute to compare the U.S. to other countries. And we're going to be looking at per capita household water use in liters. Per capita means per person in the household. So if you have 4 people in your household, that number of 4 would be used as a division. And we'll look at the liters. So this is per person. So in Australia, almost 1,000 liters of water are used. Let me think. This is, well, I'm sorry, I don't have the number of gallons written down here, but it's a tremendous amount of water use. Second only to Australia there is Canada, and third, the United States. Then as you move down the line, Mexico, which is warmer certainly than our climate, uses about, certainly less than half of what Australia uses. And you can look further down here, France, Spain, considered very economically developed countries, only using 300 liters per person, and yet here in the United States we're using twice that amount. So there are various factors that go into the amount of water use, and one is cultural. In the United States, sometimes people use a lot of water for bathing. So, for example, some people shower in the morning before they go to work. Maybe they work in a hamburger place and want to get the smell off, or they go to a gym after work and they want to shower before bed. So many times in the U.S., people take more than one shower per day. Also culturally, people in the United States, not feeling a water shortage to begin with, often shower for many more minutes than people in other countries. They might wash their clothes or their towels more frequently. I remember when my kids were young, they would just drop a towel on the floor as soon as they were done and think that it was just going to get magically washed. And so I had to color code our towels. So they each got 2 towels of a certain color, and if one got dropped on the floor, they only had one left. If 2 got dropped on the bathroom floor, then they had to wash them before they had anything they could use. And sure enough, they were then able to keep their towels on the rack for quite a long time before sending it through the laundry. So other factors that go into water use might include things such as hotels. Hotels also used to wash towels and sheets in hotel rooms on a daily basis. Nowadays, they've learned to conserve water more, and the rule is if you drop the towels on the floor, then they'll know to pick it up and have it put through the wash, and otherwise, if you hang it up, they'll leave it for you for the next day. So we've made some strides on that, largely by imposing more cost to water. Water was considered very low cost, and residential water is still low cost, but businesses like hotels and power plants are charged a different rate for their water, which encouraged them to pursue ways to conserve water, not use so much. I think I've already given you the example of Lightolier lighting manufacturing plant, that first they tried to become more energy efficiency by putting they made industrial lighting, and they used to wash it twice, the little scraps after they were made, the little metal pieces, they used to wash it twice in hot water both times. And so then they found, well, let's try out doing it just once. And they found one wash was sufficient to get off the little metal shreds that happened when they were produced. And then they discovered, they did an experiment and discovered cold water was just as effective as hot water in removing the metal pieces. So they not only halved the amount of water they used, they saved all that money on heating water that was a waste of time. Okay, I should have one more slide on this topic. There we go. Just to look at some of the numbers and keep these in mind. These aren't things you need to memorize. Daily water use varies widely per capita, from 41 liters in Kenya to 600 liters in the United States. About 40% of domestic daily water use is for flushing toilets, as I mentioned. And yet, despite this, there are over 1 billion people worldwide that lack access to clean drinking water. And we will talk about that on a future screencast. Every year, over 1.8 million people die in less developed countries due to waterborne diarrheal illnesses.